All right, Alan, I've tried to do a couple of different videos, a couple of different ways, living in the country, you know, with all the finest amenities. It said it was going to take about 2.5 hours to upload the video, so I'm going to do this on my phone. So anyway, yesterday when I did the long distance shooting, I showed you that I was with my Pierce 400s, I was tearing slightly high right. And actually that's probably more like, I don't know, 2 millimeters high right. Not so much right, but more high. But when you get a high right tear, this is what you get with your Bareshaft. It comes out knock high, pointing to the left, it planes off, and this is what you get. Now, as a starting point for my bow, I always take the arrow shaft and I lay it on the wheels and get the arrow shaft running parallel to the string. It doesn't always end up that way when I get done Bareshaft tuning, and that's completely dependent upon the cable guard. The cable guard is a bow's worst enemy, and there are so many ways that you can fix that, and I dink around with it a little bit, and if you want to know just how much of an influence your cable guard has on your bow, look at your scope or pins in relation to your arrow at rest, and that'll tell you how much torque the cable guard imparts on the bow. But anyway, the very first thing you do is you shoot your Bareshaft. So on this one I'm hitting low left. The very first thing you have to do is move your arrow rest up or your knock point down, because you want this arrow on the same plane as your fletched arrow. You got to move your arrow rest or your knock point first to get these on the same plane. Once you've got them on the same plane, then what you're going to do is you're going to twist the yoke. If you can do it, you're going to twist the yoke on the opposing side of the bow from the Bareshaft. So if your Bareshaft hits on the left, you're going to twist the right yoke. If you have a bow that only has one yoke system, say on the top, you need to be very, very sure that when you twist that yoke, you go back and retime those wheels. Timing is crucial, and I know that there's going to be some people out there that say timing doesn't mean anything. If timing didn't mean anything, we wouldn't have stops on our wheels. Timing is important, very important. So anyway, you hit to the left, twist the yoke on the right. For me, I always think about it, I take the bottom wheel and I lean it towards where the Bareshaft is hitting. Or I point the top where I want the Bareshaft to go. But for easier, purposes, I'm just going to say if your arrow hits to the left, twist the yoke on the right. If the arrow hits on the right, twist the yoke on the left. Now with the Bowtech, I have yokes on top and bottom, so what I can do is twist them evenly and get the arrow to come together like this. Now, after I got done doing this, this arrow is still ever so slightly low, but I really can't trust that because I heard it hit the arrow, so I don't know if it kicked down or what. But this is pretty darn close. It's only a 1/2 inch apart, and I'm really not going to fool with it any more than that, because after I did this, I shot it through paper, and I've got a tiny, tiny, tiny 1/2 millimeter high, 1/2 millimeter left tear. I'm fine with that. Years and years ago, I think it was Easton did a test, and they with compound shooters and recurve shooters, and they did the shooting, and they found that people were more consistent with high left tears. I don't know how much I buy into all that, but their theory was, well, it gives the arrow a direction, and because it gives it a direction, it's less likely to be influenced by other variables like wind and stuff like that. Again, I'm not going to worry about all that. But anyway, this is just a baseline for me, because 3 or 4 days from now, when it gets super hot and humid out here, this will probably look like this. And 3 days later, when it gets cool again, this will probably look like this, because you're shooting a material on your bow that is susceptible to everything. Is susceptible to weather. I don't care what anybody says. Even metal is susceptible to weather, with shrinking and and expanding with heat. And even though it may be minute, this right here, with these arrows 4 inches apart, and this right here with the arrows 1/2 inches apart, resulted in a tear that was only 1 millimeter different. And this one is in the middle, and while this arrow went up higher because of the arrow rest, it didn't come out of the middle of the X. So that ought to tell you something. Again, I keep going back to, we want to focus so much on tuning our bows, but then we want to torque tune our bows and forcibly put a tear into the paper with a right tear and a left tear, because if you torque left, you get a right tear. If you torque right, you get a left tear. And if you don't torque at all, you get a bullet hole, and somehow the arrow's hitting the same down range. So if that doesn't tell you that, that getting a bullet hole is necessary in order to get a good impact down range, that's a contradiction right there. So, you know, take it for what it's worth. This is the way you can correct it. This is the way you can fix things. Now, one thing you do have to understand is if you have wheels that aren't unraveling or raveling the string at the same rate, you're not going to get a good knack travel, and you may get one or the other. You're probably going to get a good bullet hole and not a Bareshaft, or you're going to get a good Bareshaft and not a good bullet hole. Case in point, last year I was shooting a bow that I could get one or the other, but not both at the same time. For instance, if I got a good bullet hole, my Bareshaft was way off, and if I got a good Bareshaft, my arrow was coming out tearing knock low. So I settled for paper tune, but it didn't change in anything as far as my scores were concerned. So don't beat yourself up over it. Get it close, and then focus on you. That'll work.